Hello. I said last time that I would do my next video, which has been a little while, I recognize, on romantic relationships. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a kind of generally specific overview, if there is such a thing. So I'm going to give an overview, but talk about a couple of specific topics and give a little bit of detail. So it's going to take your attention or need your attention this session because there's quite a bit of information to take in. But you could do it in bite-sized chunks and come back to it if you like to. I want to set the scene by saying that this this session, this YouTube video is basically for educational and informational purposes only. And so if you find yourself quite affected by this, I would just invite you perhaps, if you feel minded and it's helpful, to think about approaching a professional if it's affected you really sufficiently in order to get some help with any thoughts or feelings that might come up. But hopefully it won't be too difficult, but might, of course, trigger some feelings and certainly some thoughts for you. I'm going to look at, in a macro way, how do we get and have problems? So why do we have problems? And also, importantly, how can we fix them? And one of the places that I want to start is with us as human beings, our need for bonding, for connection, for love, for attachment. We are bonding mammals. And what that means is that we are biologically wired and thrive best actually operating in an interdependent environment. What does that mean? Well, it means we enjoy our independence as individuals and enjoy autonomy and self-reliance. We're also a kind of herd pack mammals that need social contact and interaction with each other, practically, psychologically, and physically in many cases. So when we have a good balance of both these, that's really the precondition for thriving. I want to say just a bit about our need for bonding and attachment. It wasn't until 60 years ago, roughly, that we first understood the biological imperative for us all of our need for emotional and relational connection. And this is built around the century into recognizing that from cradle to grave, all human beings, whatever their age, need and feel most secure and confident in life when they have access to meaningful relational contact, including when we feel distressed, reaching out to others for comfort, reassurance, and soothing, as well as on the flip side of that coin, really appreciating when others see us as important and primary and come to us when they're feeling vulnerable for comfort, reassurance, and soothing from us. So this biological imperative, I would say, is constantly priming every day our behavior, or much of our behavior, and also our conversation and how we react to both of those parts of human life. I would also say from my own experience that it would be reasonable to think of a part of the mind that's constantly, second to second, appraising, monitoring, responding to whether we feel nicely connected to others and the outside world, or indeed whether there are occasions and moments when we lose that sense of enjoyable connection and feeling nice and relaxed and confident and feel what we might group as discomfort. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples of what I do as an emotionally focused couples therapist, which is the name for the form of couple counseling that I do. And I'll put an insert into the information at the bottom of the video for a national organization here in Great Britain, United Kingdom, that you can contact if you're interested in finding an emotionally focused couples therapist in your area. So I'm going to show these examples of what I do as part of the work that I do with couples and clients to help them recognize and find ways of describing the steps of the pattern, the argument, the discussion, whatever it is that they regularly get involved with that feels discomforting and difficult and gradually um, causes an effect on their relationship connection to the point that they may feel that one suggests or they both suggest that we go and see a couples counsellor. So I'm just going to focus for a moment on my computer parts, and I'm first going to bring up what is essentially a fairly empty page, but there'll be some headings on it which we'll go through. So hopefully you can see that. And at the top, we're looking at a blank page with 7 headings and a horizontal dotted line and headed by the word our cycle. So that's a name that we give in emotionally focused couples therapy quite commonly to a couple who are coming to see us as practitioners of couple therapy as a way of describing the uncomfortable and regular patterns they get involved with. But you could use words like circle, loop, dance of disconnection if you want to be poetic, or with some couples who have quite a conflicted pattern and cycle, you could even call it colloquially as something like the Clash of Titans. Okay, we've got 2 columns there, separated from each other, and they all have the same headings. And if you think of them as vertical, you know, I'll get a couple to put their names at the top of one column and their partner's name at the top of the other column. And then we're going to write down eventually words and phrases that describe their cycle, their dance of disconnection as we go through it with them. So I am going to show you in a moment a filled in cycle sheet here, but I just want to walk down and through what the headings are referring to so we've got a greater understanding of what this is representing. So the word trigger is a beginning point. You could use the word cue or stimulus to mean the same thing. And it will start with something like, so when when you raise your left eyebrow and arch it, I start feeling such and thinking such and such. That's a concrete example of a trigger in one person. And when that person responds to their partner arching their eyebrow, we then track that, and so it goes from side to side. Perception thought, you could also use the word appraisal or attribution. So typically things like we think inside in our minds, I can never get it right, here we go again. Reactive response is the most immediate way that we react and respond to an uncomfortable stimulus. For most people, it will be a variation of annoyance or actual annoyance, could be frustration. For some people, it's a bit more visceral. They might describe, feeling deflated, but a kind of a sinking feeling, so it's more in their body. But the majority of people, it will either be frustration or annoyance. And then the 4th heading, the action or behavior, varies from we argue, we disagree, we intellectualize, we rationalize, make points, we criticize, I leave the room, you turn the TV on, all sorts of things describe our action behavior when we feel this uncomfortable trigger. Okay, so that's in a sense what we're most immediately aware of when we recognize there's a regular pattern with our partner. And then the horizontal line kind of refers to our consciousness, our awareness of all that we're feeling in our minds. And typically, because we encourage each other as a species to um, describe what we're thinking and what we believe and making points. That's often what takes out quite a lot of our mind. But actually, underneath, as we're going to find in a moment, we're often got an additional experience that's got more vulnerable emotions like sadness, fear, or shame. And we're maybe not feeling loved in the way that we like to feel. And so that's also part of what's going on underneath. Before we go and look at those final three headings, I want to bring in here as a marvelous example in nature, a beautiful analogy and metaphor for a distressed relationship. It would be associated with being somewhere cold like the Arctic Circle on a passenger liner and going past, say, a fairly small pointed iceberg and being forgiven for thinking, well, that's it, that's the iceberg. But actually, when we think about it, we may know that the iceberg, or we'll know that the iceberg is the top bit is connected to a much larger piece of real estate underneath, for which the top owes its sustained existence. In other words, if it breaks off, then that's self-evident. But although we're only seeing visibly the top part above the waterline is actually connected. So that's a beautiful metaphor for what's going on here in a negative relationship cycle, is that in particular, the first two under the dotted line, the vulnerable emotion and the connection experience, are equivalent to the piece of real estate that's under the water through which the top part of the iceberg is connected. And primes your connection experience and the emotions, the vulnerable emotion that comes with it, primes the top half of what you do. If you get annoyed or you speak or you shut down, whatever that is, we want to think that it's coming from the bottom half. And that gives us a complete reframe for what's running an unsatisfying conversation or interaction or experience. It's actually a protest, but we'll see exactly what type of protest in just a moment. So let's go underneath that horizontal line, vulnerable emotion here. This is referring typically to variations of the main emotions of fear, sadness, and shame. And then the connection experience is referring to how, in a sense, we are feeling in terms of whether we feel nicely connected, in which case we might feel happy, say we're feeling secure and we're feeling loved and connected, as well as words that fit with disconnected, which might be lonely or alone or not valued or not a good teammate or disrespected or not physically desired or not lovable. And then how the cycle ends is typically, we don't say anything to each other for a few days, or somebody apologizes and we get back, but we never fully resolve it, or we don't speak about it again and then have to do the weekly shop together. And if we've had a period of silence, then we sort of find ourselves gradually getting back to talking with each other. So those are some of the typical ways the pattern ends until the next time it happens. But it also includes shoving things under the carpet or adding to the pile that's already there, never really resolving and repairing that's this part of it. And so when you get stuck in that top part and it's all about annoyance and feeling criticized and trying to explain and feeling discouraged and so on, but that what you do, um we get caught in it in a kind of an infinity loop until we do something different. But most of us don't know how to do something different, which is why we need some help with it. Okay, I realize there's a lot of information here, so if you're already feeling overwhelmed, but you're sort of quite interested in some of it, you might want to, pause and then come back to it and pick it up here or take it in bite-sized chunks. But now I'm just going to stop the share here and go back to our second and final image here, which is a filled in couple sheet. Okay, so I haven't put names here at the top. I just put person A and person B, but when I'm getting a couple to fill in those sheets, they will be writing in their names and I'll be writing in their names when I have a sheet in front of me. And the first thing you need to do is agree on what the trigger or the topic is. Otherwise, if you don't do that, you might find that person B is remembering such and such and writing things down to do with that, and person A is doing a different one. So you have to first of all agree which one you're going to do. And it's going to start with one person and then how the other person responds to that, and then how person A then responds to them. So here in our example, we want something concrete, we want something specific that's going to start off person B feeling uncomfortable and person A also feeling uncomfortable. So here we start with person A, and their trigger is, it's when you look away from me. Nice and simple, it captures it. And then the next bit is, what thought might that set off? Sometimes we share these thoughts verbally, but mainly they're thoughts inside our head. I'm just not important to you. And my reactive response is actually to show you that I'm feeling annoyed and frustrated. And generally, I can recognize that, and you can recognize there's an emotion here of annoyance or frustration. And then typical ways that capture and reflect, the style and characteristic of my action and behavior at the time when I feel, annoyed and frustrated, is that overall I get annoyed and I recognize that, and you certainly tell me that this is what you feel, that I'm criticizing you. But because this has gone on for some time, I'm also aware that sometimes I alternate this with giving up because it's been going on so long without being healed and repaired and fixed, and I'm beginning to get a little quite discouraged. So then when I've done those top four, I'll ask person B, what's that like to hear? Does that typically fit with your experience? Is there anything surprising? Generally, they say, yes, that does fit. Occasionally, they comment on one aspect of it. And then I ask person B, well, okay, what is it that starts you feeling uncomfortable? What's the moment and what does it feel like? And they'll say, well, it's when you overall or literally tell me I'm not listening. And I think inside, here we go again. I can never get it right for you. And my reactive response, well, I certainly notice that often I have a sort of deflated and a sinking feeling in my body, but sooner or later, I think I probably show you and you might pick up that I'm feeling frustrated. And then my action behavior is described and summarized by I explain or disagree. And then, when that seems to not pacify you and you seem to intensify and keep going, I shut down. And now I alternate that with getting defensive or counterattacking because this pattern has gone on for a long time and I'm feeling pretty helpless and out of tools. So that's that top bit of the iceberg. But I've already said that attachment is constantly going on for us human beings. So have we got a way of actually reframing or understanding these very common, we all have them I've had them, you've had them if you've had relationships, these patterns, but mostly people get caught and affected by them, and sometimes it leads to terminal separation or divorce when then these patterns don't change. So they're very, very important. So let's now look at those vital top two headings underneath the horizontal dotted line. And first of all, let's go to the connection experience. So for person A, they came up with lonely, alone, not appreciated, in other words, feeling uncomfortable and not wanted. And they felt that when they experienced their partner looking away from them. Instantaneously. They might not have recognized it because the next thing that happens is we respond. And if we don't feel safe to notice that we're feeling vulnerable or safe to talk about it with our partner, we'll use rational explanation, making points, and we'll allow ourselves to feel an emotion that helps us feel less helpless and more potent. So often we'll naturally get annoyed. So not always in every respect, but annoyance is often a secondary reactive, responsive emotion. It's valid. It needs to be entitled to when we're feeling vulnerable or don't feel safe to dwell there and feel the vulnerability and show it to other people. It's a coping mechanism and a very natural one, an understandable one for all of us. So when person A feels lonely, alone, not appreciated and wanted, this primes and sparks emotions that texturize and give it, if you extra dimension. So we'll feel sadness, in this case, scared, powerless. So you're beginning, hopefully, to get a sense of why that analogy and that iceberg is so important. What's underneath is priming, and what's on the top there, in the top half of this diagram, owes its existence and continuing going round and round because of the vulnerability we're feeling underneath. Okay, so then I'll go to person B and I'll say, is there anything that you just heard from your partner that you didn't recognize before? And sometimes they'll say, not always, they'll say, you could have fooled me as that they're feeling kind of scared or sad. All I see is I'm getting it wrong, I'm being criticized, and they're angry. So that acts as a sort of reframe for person B to kind of go, really? You sure? You don't sound vulnerable to me. You kind of sound powerful, and I may not like that anger or may recognize the anger is destructive to the relationship. I don't see that vulnerability. And then I ask them to kind of go to their connection experience. Well, I haven't got many words right now, but the words I've got is I don't feel valued. And being valued is important to me. And generally speaking, I do recognize, in terms of Nick, you talking about bonding and attachment, I'm feeling, and connection, I'm feeling disconnected. And it's maybe not easy it's for me to talk about or show or reveal, but it does scare me. And it scares me that when I remember back to what we've shared in the past and the start of the relationship, maybe many years that we had, it doesn't always last that long before this negative cycle comes in for some people. But it scares me what's happening to our love and our connection here. And in this pattern, I often feel ill-equipped and inadequate, actually. I keep hearing that I'm getting it wrong. I can't get it right for you, even though I try and explain myself. And it's true, I feel helpless and powerless. I don't know what to do. I'm out of tools. A long time ago, I went in on my toolkit and tried everything, and it's not working. So I'll sometimes shut it down or shut down with the intention of preventing further damage to the relationship, as well as giving myself some protection from feeling attacked and the vulnerability and shame that comes with that inadequacy. But my back's to the wall, which is why I sometimes defend and counterattack and don't always shut down. And well, largely I agree with how the cycle ends, but I think I'm probably the one that apologizes more. And then I'll go back to person A. So is there anything new there? And they'll sometimes pick up on the fact that their partner says that they think that they apologize more, and I have to come in and get that person A back. But do you hear anything else that was surprising? And they may say, well, my partner just shuts down or, rationalizes, and I didn't know that he or she was feeling helpless or scared. So that's what I do as an emotionally focused couples therapist, to begin to help the couple build a picture, an identical picture of what tracks the steps and the characterization of what they get caught in. And in EFT, couples therapy, we think of the cycle, the pattern itself as the problem, the enemy, although, of course, sometimes one partner thinks their partner is the problem or the enemy, or sometimes they think, they don't do them very well themselves. They might say, maybe I'm just no good in relationships. But it's the pattern that keeps going round and round that is destructive to the love and the goodwill and the sense of importance and meaning of your partner as a haven and a resource to share life with and seek shelter with from the vicissitudes and the stresses of life. We're not taught about this, or if we are, it's not enough in our mainstream education, which is why I'm doing some of these videos and encouraging others who have knowledge and information that's directly helpful for us, particularly at this time with what's going on in the world. We need help. But there is a bigger picture that we haven't really grasped, that's about helping us all thrive. I mean, if you don't seed and give the members of your tribe all the information they need, including psychological, relational, linguistic, dispute resolution, mediation, and just focus them on intellectual ways of finding your way to earn money and just focus on practical life. They're vital, those three. But when you keep them and you don't give enough holistic information and education around our attachment needs, our psychology needs, we understand the importance of the mind, then how do you expect our species and its individual members to thrive? We're walking around in the dark, bumping into sharp structures and blunt structures and each other. So it's vital this information begins to get put out there in all those sorts of media, mainstream and alternative forms. In my view, anyway, absolutely vital. And this is part of why I do these videos. Okay, so I think that's enough information for now, probably more than enough. Notice that what we've done here is to put a limited amount of information in, but that does represent largely sufficiently, captures the experience of person A and person B, so that when you've had the latest version of the pattern and cycle, and it takes time for it to start de-escalating, you can maybe have this in a drawer and you go when you're feeling a bit more like less annoyed and angry and more open to looking at what you've written here for the cycle, to have a look and get that piece of paper out and actually say, wait a minute, what just happened now in the last couple of minutes? Ah, I know I was feeling really annoyed a moment ago, or I was feeling really criticized. But when I look at what's going on in me, and then I look at what's going on in that, if my partner's the one that's angry, annoyed, and criticizing me, maybe he or she actually it was a protest, a vulnerable protest, but in the form of annoyance or anger. And then I try and intellectualize or I try and explain, which is my way of trying to respond. But that seems to make my partner worse. And if my partner escalates and intensifies in his or her annoyance and accusations, and just generally my feeling is I'm not being heard and understood here, then I'm either going to shut down, or if this pattern goes on for too long, I'm going to come out swinging myself a bit, getting a bit defensive and counterattacking. So not too much written down is useful to come and kind of see the pattern. And this is what I'm helping couples do as part of working and on when they both agree and come in the first session and say, yes, we'd like to work on our relationship. What I'm helping them do over time. This is part of what I help them do. But the next bit relates to how do we fix it in emotionally focused couples therapy? How do you repair a relationship that's distressed? Well, it takes time because we're going to keep on doing the same things like rationalizing, making points, what feels like criticism until we've had sufficient help from the sessions to begin to sometimes not go so long, so deep, so far into the negative pattern. And it's a shorter time until one of us maybe goes, hey, wait a minute, let's get that cycle sheet out, or what's going on in you? I'm not going at you here. Are you feeling a little vulnerable emotionally? So in terms of what I've just said there, we have to learn with the help, usually of the professional. It's really difficult to change this pattern on our own. Even reading a book, that can help to learn how to speak verbally differently. And so to finish, I'm just going to say a few things about what needs to happen to change the cycle and start healing it and repairing it. So it's actually quite simple, but not easy to do. What we need to be able to do is recognize that we are feeling vulnerable and find words to describe the emotions or the feeling of disconnection. So we need to be able to know that we're scared or sad. We need to be able to know that we're feeling lonely and alone and not desirable. We need to know that we're feeling helpless and that we're deficient and that's painful and sad the way things are going. And we need to know that our partner still values us. So one of the ways that we do that is setting up a situation with your partner in a sort of formal sense where you say, have you got time? Are you available for us to have a go at doing what, Nick helps us to do sometimes in the sessions, but we know we need to learn to do this and stand on our own 2 feet. And we also understand we're going to make mistakes and fall down, and then we can go back in the next session and bring that to Nick, and he can help us kind of recognize what went on in the pattern and sort of repair it, and then keep going to the next step of recovery. So we need to be kind of a bit curious and not talk in a way in which our partner is going to hear that we're criticizing them or we're going into explanation again and a justification. So it begins with a few things like, so are you free? And the other person says, we'll imagine like yes, and say, I don't know I don't know exactly whether I'm going to find the right words, and I'm very scared that, maybe you won't like what I'm saying, or you maybe even reject me. But I want to say something about how I'm feeling without you hearing I'm criticizing you. I'm actually feeling really lonely. What's that like to hear? And the other person might go, that's different. Or it may take them a little time to take it in and feel safe enough to kind of respond. But then they might say, okay, well, that does sound a bit different, and it's not been easy for me, but I understand it's not been easy for you. And yeah, I guess I never used to tell you how I was feeling underneath, but I don't like this. I don't like what's happening to our relationship. And I realized in Nick's language, we've become disconnected. We've lost our sense of feeling loved and secure and that we matter to each other. And yeah, I want to do that differently. That may sound very alien and foreign and kind of yucky or scary, but then that's part of what, over time, the EFT couples therapist, that's emotionally focused couples therapy. There's another therapy that has the same acronym EFT that's called emotional freedom techniques. It's a different kettle of fish. That's what an emotionally focused couples therapist would build up and help a couple to start feeling more in touch with their feeling environment, that it's okay. We all have them. It may take some time to recognize that feelings are there rather than just logic or rationality. But gradually to start creating experiences in the sessions that build to a point where the couple begin to feel that their pattern is reduced, de-escalated, they're feeling a bit better, a bit safer, a little bit more confident. They know there's still a long way to go, but they're gradually going in that direction. So just to reflect on the need, how do we get stuck? How do we get caught in this? What is this? How do we fix it? How do we cure it? We've touched on that. I've touched on that in this session. Well, thank you for watching, and I hope you're not too overloaded, but I think it's important to have gone into enough detail to kind of give you a picture of what it is that you're dealing with, we're all dealing with. If I haven't said it already in this session, I think it's really important that we begin to put this information out there and begin to model it. Those of us that, work in that area and therefore can kind of show it and reveal it when being interviewed or whatever, in order to disseminate this very, very vital, important information out there for the whole of the human race. Because at the moment, it's very helpful. There are therapists who use this form. There's educational information, but it's compartmentalized. And our mainline institutions and politicians are not really talking in ways and behaving in ways that show to us all that they also operate from emotion and whether they feel connected or disconnected. And it will be really, really helpful if we begin to talk gradually differently with each other when we need to. We don't have to talk about this stuff all the time, just when it's needed. So I hope to be, when the muse visits again, giving more information about relationships or sociolinguistics, which is an interest area of mine, which is kind of how socially we talk, conversation, dispute resolution, mediation. But I'm also very interested in some of the topics that are going on in society. And I think probably the next video that I'm going to do is to be talking about ID and the ID that the Prime Minister referenced to recently in relation to concepts, ethical, psychological concepts that are associated with the whole discussion around ID and identifying yourself in this ways. Thank you very much for listening. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe for future videos. You'll automatically be told. And also, if you would be willing to disseminate to anybody that you know, friends, partners, family members, so on and so forth, your MP, if you think that they'd appreciate it. We need to get this information out. So until our next time, thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye for now.